We're still here on the JoyNews channel and would have to break into sports today to bring you a live transmission of a news conference that is being addressed by the opposition NDC from their headquarters in Adabraka, Accra. Communications Officer Sami Jemfi is addressing the media. We'll go over now.
Press conference is being streamed live on JoyNews television, GH1 television, United Television, UTV, Power 97.9 FM, Asempa 94.7 FM, Radio Gov't 90.5 FM, Loud Silence Television. We are grateful to our brother Kevin Taylor for always giving us live coverage. We are also live on Ahoto FM 92.3 FM and on the NDC's Communication Bureau pages on Facebook and Twitter. And this live feed is being provided by none other than our most reliable partner, Weasel Television. We are also grateful to My Joy Online for giving us live updates on their portal. And we also acknowledge Active TV, who have gone out of their way to give us live coverage for this press conference this afternoon. We are most grateful to all these media partners for live coverage for this all-important press conference. Ladies and gentlemen, our engagement with you today will focus on the ever-worsening living conditions of the Ghanaian people and the insensitive handling of same by the duty bearers of our country. You would all agree with me that we are not in normal times in Ghana, and that all of us assembled here today, including you in the media, are finding it difficult to live your normal lives. Indeed, it is more difficult to hew water out of a rock, or perhaps for the camel to pass through the eye of the needle, than for one to make ends meet in Ghana today. However hard you try or have mastered the art of living, the economic realities of Ghana today will certainly overwhelm you. Cost of living today is unbearable, leading to many individuals and households going hungry, broken marriages, and many falling further below the poverty line. Cost of doing business in Ghana today has gone off the roof, leading to the suffocation of many businesses. The point has to be made, however, that general hardships per se are not a new phenomenon in our country. However, the current economic hardships Ghanaians are experiencing today are unprecedented in their scale and unbearable in their impact. Today, the Consumer Price Index, which is the barometer for measuring inflation or changes in the prices of goods and services, and all other known economic indicators point to the fact that we are not in normal times. Yet, the Akufo-Addo government is not minded to provide relief for the suffering masses. Government has neither demonstrated any sensitivity towards the Ghanaian people who are the receiving end of this intolerable hardship, nor shown any acumen or ability to ameliorate the untold economic hardships we are reeling under. Alas, to borrow the words of one of Africa's famous novelists, Chinua Achebe, the center cannot hold. Things continue to fall apart as continuous economic hardship is unleashed on the Ghanaian people on a daily basis. Distinguished friends from the media, at this juncture, it bears painting a picture of the current state of our economy in order to put the issues into their proper perspective. I therefore invite you to come with me on a journey, which will be a bit long, of the Akufo-Addo economic reality of today. First, we will deal with the issue of high inflation. Friends from the media, the most reliable indicator of the average change in prices of goods and services over a period of time is the rate of inflation. As we speak, the rate of inflation, which stood at 15.4% in December 2016, has galloped to a whopping 30% as of June 2022. This inflation rate is the worst in the sub-region. And in fact, the worst inflation rate Ghana has recorded in the last 19 years. One would have thought that this mid-year period would have at least provided government with an opportunity to take steps towards arresting the ever-rising inflation rate we are currently confronted with. Sadly, however, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta last week presented the 2022 mid-year budget review to Parliament, in which he projected an end-of-year inflation of 28.5%. What this means is that President Akufo-Addo and his Vice Alhaji Bawumia, ably supported by their Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, have given up on arresting the current trend of inflationary pressures and have instead thrown their hands up in despair. Simply put, the suffering and excruciating hardships we are reeling under will continue to persist for the rest of the year with no end in sight. To be projecting an end-of-year inflation rate of 28.5%, ladies and gentlemen, underlines the crass incompetence, cluelessness, and uselessness of the economic management team chaired by the Vice President, Alhaji Bawumia. Sadly, while the Akufo-Addo government continues to pay lip service to this problem of rising inflation, it is at the same time offering very little in terms of leadership, vision, and proactive steps to address the push factors of this high inflation. Friends from the media, it is trite knowledge, even to the uninitiated, that the main factors pushing up inflation in Ghana today, and to a large extent the economic hardships we are experiencing, are the exchange rates, fuel prices, and tax payments, among others. A government's handling of these three important issues largely influences its ability to stabilize inflation, improve general economic well-being, among others. And so, to these factors, that is fuel prices, exchange rates, and tax payments, we now turn our attention. First, we'll deal with fuel prices. Distinguished men and women of the Inky fraternity, fuel price hikes today have become a frequent occurrence, with prices going up at the pump sometimes twice or thrice a week. This phenomenon has largely been occasioned by the continuous depreciation of our national currency, the Ghana cedi, under the watch of the MPP self-professed economic wizard and now turned comical IT champion, Alhaji Bawumia. There is no gainsaying the fact that fuel prices have a ripple effect on the prices of general goods and services because of their direct impact on transport fares. Therefore, when fuel prices keep going up, it sparks a negative contagion on everything else. Contrary to what President Akufo-Addo, Alhaji Bawumia, and there are many apologists in government will have us believe, the astronomical increases in fuel prices in recent time have very little to do with the 5-month-old Russian-Ukrainian war. On the contrary, it has to do largely with the continuous depreciation of the cedi against its major trading currencies, notably the US dollar. This is simply because the fuel we consume at the downstream sector, is imported. Today, the US dollar, which used to trade with the cedi at 4 Ghana cedis 20 pesos in December 2016, is trading with the cedi at about 9 Ghana cedis. I just checked it before I walked here. I walked into the hall. 9 Ghana cedis. This has resulted in the deterioration of the capital of most bulk oil distribution companies and oil marketing companies. These entities who are struggling to break even are left with no option than to pass on the knock-on effects of the currency depreciation to the final consumer. This is what has mainly resulted in persistent and astronomical increases at the pumps, which have moved the price of a gallon of diesel from about 14 Ghana cedis as of December 2016 to as high as 60 Ghana cedis as we speak. As a matter of fact, the price of a liter of diesel today, which is 13 cedis, 30 pesos, is almost the same as what the price of a gallon is made up of 4.5 liters. But today, the price of a liter of diesel, which is 13.3 Ghana cedis, 13 cedis, 30 pesos, I repeat, is almost the same as what the price of a gallon of diesel used to be in the year 2016, 14 Ghana cedis. This is how bad things have become in this country under the bad leadership of the Bawumia-led economic management team. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you all recall the solemn pledge of President Akufo-Addo and Alhaji Bawumia to move Ghanaians from taxation to production. Well, needless to say that this promise, like similar others, has become a pipe dream, as we have instead progressed from taxation to more taxation and more taxation, with no effort nor commitment whatsoever on the part of this government to reduce the level of tax payments in the country. Instead of moving us from taxation to production as they promised, this government has introduced a raft of needless taxes like never seen before on the price buildup of fuel. One of such taxes is the 10 pesos sanitation levy imposed by the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government on every liter of petrol and diesel. Never has it been heard in our history, ladies and gentlemen, that a government has to rely on a special tax handle on fuel to keep our surroundings clean. We insist that the introduction of this levy in this time of extreme economic difficulties and in this time that we are engulfed with filth, even in the capital city of Accra, is unjustifiable, unacceptable, and smacks of insensitivity of the highest order. Another tax handle that this government has nominally increased and extended on the price buildup of fuel is a special petroleum tax. The 17.5% ad valorem special petroleum tax was introduced in the year 2015 at a time the international market price of crude oil, which was projected at $94 for that year, had declined to below $50. The SPT thus was a temporary tax measure meant to shore up declining oil revenues for development purposes. You all recall how the MPP, while in opposition, berated the ex-while NDC Mahama government for introducing this tax, bastardized same, and labeled it as a nuisance tax, promising to scrap same if elected. Interestingly, since this government came into office, they have changed the special petroleum tax from an ad valorem tax of 41 pesos as of December 2016 to a straight tax of 46 pesos per liter of petrol and diesel. even though the special petroleum tax has outlived its usefulness, owing to the fact that the international market price of crude oil today, or in recent time, has risen to as high as $117 per barrel, a situation that has given government huge windfall profit, as captured at paragraph 27 of the 2022 mid-year budget review statement. In spite of all this, the insensitive Akufo-Addo Bawumia government continues to charge Ghanaians a special petroleum tax of 46 pesos on every liter of diesel and petrol, even in these difficult times. We submit that the continuous maintenance of the special petroleum tax on the price build-up of fuel by the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, when the reasons for its introduction no longer exist, is no longer tenable. Friends from the media, again, one of the taxes on fuel which the MPP, while in opposition, vehemently opposed and promised to scrap if elected is the Energy Sector Levies Act, ESLA, which was introduced by the ex-Wal NDC Mahama government in the year 2015 to clear legacy debts that were crippling the energy sector at the time. Instead of scrapping this tax as they promised, and very typical of them, the tax has rather been increased by 30% and has been collateralized for a loan which has extended the duration of the tax from its original duration of 5 years to 2015, that is until 2035. As if that was not enough, the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government only last year, 2021, introduced a new energy sector levy of 20 pesos per liter of diesel and petrol and 18 pesos per kilogram of LPG. Here again, we submit that the imposition of these so-called energy sector levies on Ghanaians in this time of extreme economic hardships is callous and totally unacceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to these taxes I have enumerated, is a price stabilization and recovery levy of 16 pesos and 14 pesos per liter of petrol and diesel respectively, which we all as consumers pay anytime we buy fuel. This tax is meant to be used to subsidize the cost of premise fuel and, more importantly, to subsidize the prices of fuel at the downstream sector for fuel consumers when the international market price of crude oil goes up like we have experienced in recent times. Per our conservative estimates, corroborated by ASEP's estimates, the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government has collected in excess of 3 billion Ghana cedis in price stabilization and recovery levies in the last 5.5 years, but has woefully failed to apply these funds for their intended use, which is to cushion fuel consumers. These crippling fuel taxes and other existing margins on the price build-up of fuel, such as the boss margin, which has been increased by 200% from 3 pesos to 9 pesos. We understand it has been brought down to 9 pesos now, 7 pesos now. The fuel market margin, among others, are what have conspired with the continuous depreciation of the Ghana cedi to make the prices of fuel excessively high in Ghana, and in fact, far higher than the prices of fuel in the sub-region and in our neighboring countries. Friends from the media, what is even more painful is the fact that on top of all these crippling taxes heaped on the price build-up of fuel, the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government has imposed certain obnoxious taxes on the Ghanaian people that have further escalated the hardships in the country to unbearable proportions. After receiving more than enough inflows, totaling about 35 billion Ghana cedis, equivalent to about $5 billion to manage and mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and after spending only 12 billion of this amount on the pandemic as reported by the finance minister to Parliament a few months ago, government last year imposed a 1% COVID levy on the National Health Insurance levy on VAT, thereby increasing it from 2.5% to 3.5%, and another COVID levy of 1% on the VAT flat rate of 3%, thereby increasing it to 4%. At a time, friends from the media, responsible governments all over the world are cushioning their citizens in one way or the other to provide them with some relief against the debilitating impact of the pandemic on their businesses and their livelihoods. Our government is punishing us with this offensive and punitive tax that simply defies logic. This is a tragedy of monumental proportions because, ladies and gentlemen, nowhere in the world, nowhere in the sub-region, nowhere in the African continent, and I dare say the world, has any government imposed a COVID levy on its people. And at no point in the history of this country has any government imposed a tax handle for the management of any disease on the Ghanaian people. Do we have an HIV levy or a malaria levy? Why then must we have a COVID-19 levy? As if the offensive COVID-19 levies were not enough, the Carlos Akufo-Addo Bawumia government again, against good counsel and wide public outcry, has stubbornly imposed another punitive 1.5% levy on Momo and electronic transactions known as the E-levy. This is after the Vice President and Chairman of the Economic Management Team, Alhaji Bawumia, promised Ghanaians in the run-up to the 2020 elections in an interview on Peace FM that Momo transactions are merely patronized by the poor, hence must not and will not be taxed by the NPP. This obnoxious E-levy, which is applied on the capital, savings, and already taxed incomes of Ghanaians, defies all the known principles of taxation in Ghana. The stealth tax has significantly reduced Momo transaction volumes and has become a great disincentive to digitalization in Ghana, as it has forced many people to find smart ways of avoiding the use of digital platforms for financial transactions. Little wonder that today government has only realized a paltry 93 million Ghana cedis as against a projected 1.4 billion Ghana cedis from the tax handle for the first half of the year 2022. As we in the NDC argued and predicted during the debate over the passage of the E-levy, it has today become apparent that the E-levy is not the panacea to the economic woes of Ghanaians as we were promised by the deceitful and clueless Akufo-Addo Bawumia government. You will recall what they said about the E-levy and how it was going to be the magic wand that was going to turn our economic situation around. They said through the E-levy they were going to build new roads, create 1 million jobs through a program called U-Start. Any problem in this country, according to the NPP, was going to be fixed with the E-levy. Even when you complained of stomach ache, they told you that pay E-levy, you'll be fine. Today, they bulldoze their way through with the E-levy. We are paying the E-levy, and yet all these problems are escalating. After displaying dismissive and stonewalled stubbornness, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, has now revised his over-ambitious end-of-year E-levy target from 6.9 billion Ghana cedis to about 640 million Ghana cedis, which we doubt would even be realized. Even more bizarre and pathetic is the fact that the counterproductive E-levy is sometimes charged on the first 100 Ghana cedis sent by some Ghanaians to their loved ones in a day, despite saying being exempted under the E-levy Act. Ladies and gentlemen, this is naked thievery being perpetrated by the Akufo-Addo government against already impoverished taxpayers and ought to be condemned by all well-meaning Ghanaians. Now, I proceed to deal with our ever-worsening exchange rates due to our worsening fiscal position. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, our worsening exchange rate continues to play a major role in driving inflation and therefore requires further attention. When I say exchange rate, simple terms, I'm talking about the dollar rate. Friends from the media, it has now become clear to the NPP that the cedi has a mind of its own and can neither be managed nor tamed by empty talk and sloganeering, as it continues to stutter quite peaceably against all of its major trading currencies and has recently been rated as the worst currency among top African currencies, having depreciated by over 17% this year alone. It is without doubt that this government has been the luckiest and most resourced government in the history of the Fourth Republic. They inherited 3 oil fields with unprecedented oil revenues from the ex-Mahama administration. They have borrowed more monies than all governments put together since independence and have had access to over $11 billion in Eurobonds alone, as compared to the $3.7 billion the ex-Mahama government got from Eurobonds and the $750 million the ex-NPP Kufuor administration got from Eurobonds. They alone have gotten $11 billion. What this means is that this government has had access to more forex, or simply put, more dollars than any government in history, yet has woefully failed to maintain a stable currency due to their wastefulness and mismanagement of the economy. The major factor that accounts for the alarming rate of the depreciation of the cedi is a huge capital outflows from our country, occasioned by our poor credit ratings and the loss of investor confidence in our economy. In simple terms, our ever-ballooning public debt and budget deficits as a country has now reached unsustainable levels due to the reckless spending and excessive borrowings of the Akufo-Addo government. This recklessness reached its crescendo in the year 2022, when, under the guise of fighting COVID-19, government went on an election-driven spending spree, leading to an unprecedented budget deficit of 15.7%. The confessions of one Felicia Tete, the NPP's 2020 parliamentary candidate for Sadnerigu and vice chairperson for Northern Region, captured on tape, lends ample proof to how COVID-19 funds were doled out to NPP functionaries and apparatchiks in the name of COVID-19 relief. It is this recklessness, ladies and gentlemen, that has plunged the country into the bottomless pit we presently find ourselves in. By kind courtesy of the excessive and consumption-driven borrowings of President Akufo-Addo and Alhaji Bawumia, Ghana's total public debt has ballooned from 120 billion Ghana cedis as of December 2016 to a whopping 393 billion Ghana cedis as of June 2022. What this means is that this government has added a whopping 273 billion Ghana cedis to our public debt in the last 5.5 years. This has moved our debt to GDP ratio from 56% in 2016 to over 80%, while debt servicing, interest payments, amortization has increased from 11 billion Ghana cedis in 2016 to over 50 billion as we speak, representing a 500% increase. Today, Ghana's fiscal position has so much deteriorated under the watch of the Bawumia-led economic management team that our total tax revenue as a country is consumed by just one budget line item, debt servicing. For instance, for the first quarter of this year, 2022, tax revenue collection stood at about 12 billion Ghana cedis, while debt servicing alone stood at over 13 billion Ghana cedis. In other words, we spent about 107% of tax revenue on only debt servicing for the first quarter of 2022 alone. This poor fiscal position of the country, created by the recklessness and mismanagement of the Bawumia-led economic management team, has tremendously increased our risk of debt defaults, worsened our credit ratings, led to our downgrade by sovereign rating agencies such as Fitch and Moody's, made us lose access to the capital markets, and resulted in huge capital outflows from the economy, thereby causing the cedi to depreciate at a very alarming rate. As a matter of fact, Ghana has been ranked number 2 on Bloomberg's latest sovereign debt vulnerability ranking published a few days ago. Of all the countries in the world, Ghana has been ranked as the second country with the highest risk of debt default. Even Somalia, Zimbabwe, Ukraine, and countries at war, countries under military rule, Syria, are all doing better relative to their debt position than Ghana. We only performed better than a country called El Salvador in Central America, with a population of about 6.8 million people, who have had to deal with a recent slump after adopting Bitcoin as its official currency. So when El Salvador dianka yere kra. What an enviable feat, shot by the Bawumia-led economic management team. Indeed, the NPP have the men. What a solid team. Ladies and gentlemen, until the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia government learned to live within its means and cut their coats according to the size of their cloth, until they stop making unrealistic fiscal projections based on cooked data, until they cut expenditure drastically and reduce their rate of borrowing and debt accumulation, the alarming rate of capital outflows will continue, because our fiscal position will worsen, investor confidence in our economy will dip further, continue to go down, and the cedi will have no other option than to depreciate. And if care is not taken, the cedi or the dollar may end up at 10 Ghana cedis by December 2022, because as I speak to you, you need about 9 Ghana cedis to buy $1. Now to an issue that young people are very much interested in, worsening unemployment situation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you are all aware of the worsening levels of unemployment in our country today. This is a government that came to power in 2016 on the back of a promise to create jobs. This promise has, however, only yielded lip service and highfalutin sloganeering with next to nothing by way of real jobs created. It is instructive to know that the rate of unemployment has increased from 8.4% in 2016-2017. Not according to me, but according to the Ghana Living Standards Survey 7, conducted by the Ghana Statistical Service, to 13.4% in 2021, according to the latest population and housing census conducted by the same institution. After inheriting an unemployment rate of 8.4% in 2016-2017, the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia government has created phantom jobs with their mouths through their so-called flagship programs such as One District, One Factory, One Village, One Dam, Planting for Food and Jobs, NABCO. The latest one is what? Ghana Cares or Batampa. These people are good in slogans. You start. And the results of all these job-creating flagship programs is that unemployment rate has increased from 8.4% to 13.4%. The very latest of these grand deceptive slogans, as I mentioned, is a YouStart program, which was supposed to be a $1 billion investment in the creation of 1 million entrepreneurial jobs. That also has turned out as a complete fiasco, because according to the mid-year budget review statement presented by the finance minister only last week, only 46 persons and 8 associations have received support under the so-called YouStart program. To make matters worse, trainees under the NABCO program, who are owed 9 months allowance arrears by the government, and were deceitfully promised permanent integration into the public service by the government, have been laid off and asked to join the non-functioning YouStart program. Even more bizarre is the fact that till date, staff of the collapsed banks and other financial institutions have not been paid their severance packages, while the private sector, which is supposed to be the engine of growth and job creation, continues to suffocate under the yoke of high cost of doing business. Distinguished friends from the media, one of the cardinal sins of this Akufo-Addo Bawumia government is their misplaced priorities that have underlined government's expenditure in the last 5.5 years. If you are one of those who have been wondering what the billions of tax revenues, borrowed funds, Eurobonds, oil revenues, and donor funds totaling about 500 billion Ghana cedis that have accrued to this government have been used for, look no further. Just check the Auditor General's reports from 2017 to 2020, and you will be shocked at how this government continued to waste meager state resources on profligacy, consumption, and corruption, and other financial irregularities. Even in these times of extreme economic difficulties, that presidents who were once accomplished businessmen, like the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, are traveling on economy class and so on. Others traveling on business class. Our president continues to fly around the globe in hyper-expensive and ultra-luxurious private jets like an Arabian king at a cost of $20,000 to the already impoverished taxpayer. Fellow countrymen and women, it is totally unacceptable. It is totally unacceptable that at a time when government cannot afford to print textbooks for basic school children, at a time when secondary schools, nursing training institutions, colleges of education are confronted with an acute food crisis, and many Ghanaians are struggling to afford 1 square meal a day, government will continue to waste the meager resources of state on the rental of luxurious private jets for the president and on other wasteful expenditures. But ladies and gentlemen of the press, we are all too familiar with the numerous excuses that have been canvassed by the Akufo-Addo Bawumia-led administration, and there are many apologies for plunging our country into this unprecedented economic turmoil. Despite having profited immensely from COVID-19 inflows, this government has sought to blame COVID-19 for everything in Ghana today, including even when the sun fails to rise. Even though we admit that, like all countries in the world, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian-Ukraine war have had negative effects on our economy, these global factors are not the major factors that have plunged us into the economic mess we have on our hands. For emphasis, neither COVID-19 nor the 5-month-old Russian-Ukrainian war is to blame for the economic malaise we have on our hands. And we say so for the following reasons. Number one, Ghana's economy showed signs of serious challenges even before COVID-19 struck. The World Bank's country director has been emphatic that our economic challenges persisted before the COVID-19 crisis. For instance, before COVID-19 was recorded in Ghana in March 2020, for those who are interested in statistics, the public debt had increased from 120 billion as of December 2016 to 225 billion, representing a nominal increase of 105 billion Ghana cedis in our public debt stock already. That was before COVID. Our debt to GDP had increased from 56% as of December 2016 to 64% in 2019 before COVID. Debt servicing, the amount of money we spend on interest on our debt and on the principal that becomes due, had increased from 11 billion in 2016 to 37 billion in 2019 and constituted about 90% of tax revenue. That was before COVID. The budget deficit, which is the measure or which is an indicator of how responsible or reckless a government is. Because the budget deficit is simply the difference between expenditure and revenue. The budget deficit had hit 7.5% in 2018 and 7% in 2019, even though government dubiously tried to conceal it from the people by claiming it was 4.8%. It is instructive to note that the 2019 budget deficit of 7% was above the fiscal responsibility or the fiscal threshold of 5%. So even before COVID, government had exceeded its own fiscal threshold of a budget deficit. Ghana cedi in 2019 saw depreciation of 12.9%. That is almost 13%. This was before COVID-19. And if you recall, the government at the time announced, was it a 19-member committee? And my senior brother, Franklin Kujo, was a member of that committee to investigate the reasons for the depreciation of the cedi. That was before COVID. It is worthy of note that the cedi depreciated by 9.6% in 2016, despite the many serious global and domestic challenges the country was confronted with. Again, before COVID, growth rate for the construction sector had declined from 8.4% in 2016 to negative 8.5% in 2019. Negative 8.5%. And the growth of the manufacturing sector had declined from a growth rate of 7.9% in 2016 to 6.5% in 2019 under the much touted One District, One Factory initiative, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, the reason why COVID-19 cannot be blamed for economic woes is that even though the COVID-19 pandemic has had some negative effects on Ghana's economy, its overall impact on tax revenue has been insignificant. In 2019, before COVID, the Ghana Revenue Authority raked in tax revenue of 43.9 billion. So let's say 44 billion Ghana cedis. In 2020, when COVID struck, government projected tax revenue of 47.2 billion, revised same to 42.7 billion because of the pandemic, but recorded more tax revenue of 45.3 billion. In 2021, government projected tax revenue of 57 billion, but recorded a total tax revenue of 57.32 billion. That is a 265 million Ghana cedis excess. In short, unlike other countries, tax revenue in Ghana has seen consistent steep increases despite the advent of COVID. Thirdly, the Akufo-Addo government has had close to 35 billion Ghana cedis, equivalent to $5 billion, to manage and mitigate the impact of COVID-19. All of which has largely been wasted on election-related expenses. Our peers, such as Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Togo, etc., did not get as much as $5 million to manage COVID-19. But these countries have done far better than Ghana in managing the pandemic and mitigating its devastating impact on their economies. Number 4, the Akufo-Addo government has had revenue from 3 oil fields, with daily production increasing from 70,000 barrels per day, with daily production increasing from about 70,000 barrels in 2016, to about 170,000 barrels, coupled with high commodity prices. And here I'm talking about oil, gold, and cocoa on the international market. In all, this government has had total revenue of over 500 billion Ghana cedis, as compared to the total revenue of 200 billion that accrued to the ex-Wal NDC Mahama government. The economic mismanagement and wastefulness is what has led us into another IMF program. Any government that has had access to over 500 billion Ghana cedis in revenue and still collapses the economy to the point of needing an IMF bailout must be the worst government in the history of the world. Finally, COVID has affected all countries in the world, including Ghana. It was a pandemic for God's sake. But whereas our peers such as Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Nigeria were very responsible in how they spent in 2020 to manage and mitigate the impact of the pandemic on their economies, thereby recording deficits of below 8% and debt to GDP ratios of below 65%, the Akufo-Addo government borrowed excessively and spent recklessly for election purposes, thereby recording a record high deficit of 15.7% and a debt to GDP ratio of close to 80% in 2020. In the year 2020, when the COVID pandemic struck, Burkina Faso recorded a deficit of 5.7%, Cote d'Ivoire recorded a deficit of 5.6%, Nigeria recorded a deficit of 5.8%, and Senegal recorded a deficit of 6.4%. But Ghana alone recorded a deficit of 15.7% because of the reckless election-driven expenses and wastage the NPP Akufo-Addo government engaged in. Did COVID-19 affect Ghana than it did our neighbors? How come that none of these countries who were all affected by the pandemic are recording double-digit deficits and high debt to GDP ratios of about 80%? How come none of these countries are recording inflation rates of 30%? To quote Dr. Bawumia, how did COVID-19 and the 4-month-old Russia-Ukraine war jump over Nigeria, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, and our other neighbors to attack only Ghana? Your guess is as good as mine. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth of the matter is that the economic mess we have on our hands has largely been brought about by the reckless spending, excessive borrowing, and crass economic mismanagement of the Bawumia-led economic management team. In conclusion, friends from the media, the economic hardships Ghanaians are currently reeling under today can be discussed all day, and yet there will be still space to contain the story of the tragic mismanagement of our economy by the Akufo-Addo Bawumia-led government. The continuous mismanagement of our economy by the Bawumia-led economic management team has borne various negative fruits and occasioned manifest difficulty for the generality of our people. It was clear from day one that Ghana's economic train was headed for a ditch, yet President Akufo-Addo has watched with complicit indolence for Alhaji Bawumia and his cousin, the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, to keep the steering wheel to a point of no return. Against all wisdom, sound counsel, and pep talk from us in opposition, civil society, and you in the media, this government refused to take remedial steps early on and will not repent from recklessness, profligacy, and misplaced priorities. Today, our economy is gasping for breath and has finally landed at the doorstep of the IMF. In case you want to know the economic temperature of Ghanaians today, just a stroll into one of the nearby markets at Nima, or Bawumia's favorite market whilst he was in opposition, Malata, will reveal this reality to you. Today, an oloka of Gari, which used to sell at 5 Ghana cedis in 2016, is going for 14 Ghana cedis. While a paint bucket of tomato, which used to sell at 8 Ghana cedis in 2016 in Accra, is now being sold at 50 Ghana cedis. Similarly, a bag of cement, which used to be sold at 27 Ghana cedis in 2016, is now being sold for 62, at some places 63 Ghana cedis. Whereas the 1.5 mm cable metal that used to be sold at 78 Ghana cedis is now being sold at 222 Ghana cedis. We are not saying that prices must come down. Prices will obviously go up because of inflation. But just look at the quantum of increases we are witnessing now. Unprecedented. In similar vein, ladies and gentlemen, a bag of pure water that used to be sold for 1 cedi 50 pesos in 2016 is today being sold for 8 Ghana cedis. A crate of eggs has increased from 12 Ghana cedis to 36 Ghana cedis. And a bag of maize, that is the one I find most shocking, a bag of maize has increased from 170 Ghana cedis to a whopping 650 Ghana cedis. In fact, somebody is telling me from the audience that it is now about 700 or what? Ghana cedis. Ladies and gentlemen, even the president's once favorite drink, Calipo, which he drank for fame in 2016 at a cool price of 50 pesos, is today being sold for a whopping 2 cedis, 50 pesos. How can parents afford to keep their kids happy with Calipo when Calipo is now being sold at such a prohibitive price? President Akufo-Addo may not be aware of this because now he doesn't drink Calipo again. He drinks very expensive champagne. But we just want him to take note. This, ladies and gentlemen, may be funny, but it is a sad reality of Ghanaians today. It is our sad reality. Almost everybody is feeling the brunt of the current economic hardship, driven mainly by food inflation, high fuel prices, careless taxes, among others. It goes without saying that parents and households are suffering. Public sector workers are suffering. Teachers are suffering. Teacher trainees are suffering. Nurses are suffering. And nursing trainees are suffering. Lecturers are suffering. And students are suffering. Market women are suffering. And drivers are suffering. NABCO trainees whose fate is unknown are suffering. And police officers are suffering. Even you, the media, are suffering. And the communication bureau is also suffering. All Ghanaians are suffering. All because of the bad leadership of the Bawumia-led economic management team. Most Ghanaians are now aware that President Akufo-Addo doesn't care about the hardships we are reeling under. Otherwise, why would he continue to appoint new ministers when Ghanaians are urging him to downsize his government? Added to this is the callous and insensitive burdens being imposed on Ghanaians by the Minister of Communications, the arrogant Oslausu, in respect of SIM card registration, which, like other policies concerning recent telecom measures, are mere measures intended to line the pockets of individuals while Ghanaians grow under the yoke of hardships. The insensitive Akufo-Addo Bawumia government must understand that there will be a day of reckoning. As a responsible opposition, and indeed a government in waiting, we in the NDC cannot sit aloof while our economy descends into the precipice. Despite the recalcitrance of this government and its sometimes antagonistic attitude to constructive criticisms and ideas, we cannot afford to allow this present state of affairs to continue to fester. It is for this reason that we call on Ghanaians to join us in demanding that the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government takes urgent steps to ameliorate our suffering and help stabilize the economy. To this end, we demand the immediate repeal of the obnoxious and the counterproductive E-levy Act of 1.5% on Momo and electronic transactions. Number two, we demand the immediate repeal of the punitive COVID-19 levy of 1% on the VAT flat rate and on NHIL. Number three, we demand the immediate scrapping of crippling fuel taxes such as the special petroleum tax that has outlived its usefulness, the boiler tax, the new energy sector levy of 20 pesos per liter of diesel and petrol, and 18 pesos per kilogram of LPG. Number four, we demand the immediate suspension of the 9 pesos boss margin and the price stabilization and recovery levy of 16 pesos and 14 pesos per liter of petrol and diesel respectively, both of which are not being applied for their intended purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, the last two puzzles for this government to resolve, if it is serious about bringing our economy back on track and restoring investor confidence, is to get rid, I repeat, is to get rid of the two villains who have been at the center of wreaking this havoc on our economy. First on the list is without doubt the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, who has proven to be an unmitigated disaster when it comes to economic management. President Akufo-Addo's cousin has run down our economy through excessive borrowings that his personal company data bank profits from. Today, his name scares away investors and evokes a feeling of insecurity for every Ghanaian. Ken Ofori-Atta has become like stale water in a bottle, and the earlier President Akufo-Addo fire his underperforming cousin, the better for the economy and all of us. As the venerable former President, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, recently said, regardless of our running to the IMF, the only way to begin the process of rebuilding, if we are to get any good deal from the IMF, is to sack Ken Ofori-Atta immediately and appoint a fresh, able hand in his stead to lead the IMF negotiations. And I'm sure you will agree with me. The next important thing for President Akufo-Addo to do is to relieve his jocular vice president, Alhaji Bawumia, from his position as head of the economic management team. The one so-called solid economic management team has now become a gaseous team who have deserted their roles and are nowhere to be found in these difficult and critical times. It is about time our tired, clueless, incompetent, and comical vice president is finally relieved for new ideas and competent hands to take over and steer the economic management team at this time of unspeakable hardships. Distinguished friends, we have no doubt that if President Akufo-Addo, who has so far proven to be headstrong and unreceptive to good counsel, will listen for once, he could begin the process of breathing life back into our ailing economy, which is almost at the point of comatose. Until then, our help is in the Lord. May God continue to bless our homeland, Ghana. Thank you very much for your attention. So, ladies and gentlemen, because I know you have no questions for me, I will quickly do a very, very brief summary in Twi because of the account stations here. And so I'll plead with media men present here just to keep your cameras in position and just to remain in your seats for the next 10 minutes for the sake of the account stations here. Some of whom